Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Wesley adjusted the hem of his knee-length black skirt. His heart raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation as he glanced at Caroline, his wife and co-conspirator in this daring adventure. "You look stunning, darling," Caroline whispered, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "That red and black jacket really brings out your eyes." Wesley smoothed down his white blouse, feeling the unfamiliar texture against his skin. "Are you sure about this? What if someone recognizes me?" Caroline laughed, a sound that always managed to put him at ease. "In those 2-inch black pumps? Not a chance. Now let's head to the park before we lose the light." They made their way to Caroline's car, parked discreetly a block away from their home. Wesley's steps were tentative at first, unused to the constriction of the skirt and the slight wobble of the heels. "You're doing great," Caroline encouraged, opening the passenger door for him. "Just remember to sit gracefully." Wesley lowered himself into the seat, careful to keep his knees together as he'd seen women do countless times. The drive to the park was short, but each passing minute heightened his nerves. As they pulled into the parking lot, Caroline turned to him with a reassuring smile. "Ready for your debut, my love?" Wesley took a deep breath, steadying himself. "As ready as I'll ever be." They exited the car, Wesley once again adjusting to the feel of heels on asphalt. Caroline linked her arm through his, guiding him towards a secluded path that wound through a copse of trees. "This is perfect," Caroline murmured, her free hand reaching into her purse. "Let's get some pictures to commemorate the occasion." Wesley posed awkwardly at first, unsure of how to stand or where to put his hands. But as Caroline snapped photo after photo, he felt himself relaxing, even beginning to enjoy the experience. "Give me a twirl," Caroline called out, and Wesley obliged, feeling the skirt lift slightly as he spun. It was in that moment of carefree joy that Caroline struck. "Oh, would you look at the time? I completely forgot about my book club meeting." Wesley froze, the smile slipping from his face. "What, Caroline, you can't be serious." But she was already backing away, her eyes dancing with barely contained laughter. "I'm so sorry, darling, but I really must dash. You'll be fine getting home on your own, won't you?" Before Wesley could protest, Caroline had turned and was hurrying back towards the car. He watched in disbelief as she drove away, leaving him alone in the growing twilight, dressed in women's clothing and with no way home but his own 2 feet. "Caroline!" he called out, his voice a mix of anger and desperation, but it was useless. She was gone. For a moment, Wesley stood rooted to the spot, panic rising in his chest. He was alone in a park dressed as a woman. How on earth was he going to get home without being seen? Taking a deep breath, he forced himself to think rationally. Their house wasn't too far away, maybe a mile or 2 at most. If he stuck to side streets and less populated areas, he might just make it without incident. With no other choice, Wesley began to walk. The first few steps were wobbly, his ankles protesting the unfamiliar angle of the heels. But as he continued, he found a rhythm, his strides becoming more confident. As he made his way out of the park and onto the quiet residential streets, Wesley found his anger at Caroline slowly dissipating. In its place, a strange sense of exhilaration began to grow. Here he was, out in public, dressed as a woman, and no one was the wiser. He passed a couple walking their dog, nodding politely as they smiled in his direction. His heart raced, but not from fear. It was the thrill of getting away with something, of being someone else entirely. As he turned onto a slightly busier street, Wesley caught his reflection in a store window. He paused, taking in the sight of himself. The skirt hugged his hips in a flattering way, and the jacket gave him a hint of curves he'd never had before. With his hair styled and a touch of makeup, he realized he made quite a convincing woman. A group of young men walked by, and Wesley held his breath, waiting for some comment or sign of recognition. But they passed without a second glance, engrossed in their own conversation. Wesley couldn't help but smile to himself. He was doing it. He was actually pulling this off. As he continued his journey home, Wesley found himself paying attention to details he'd never noticed before. The way other women walked, the subtle adjustments they made to their clothing. He began to mimic these movements, feeling more natural with each step. He was so engrossed in his observations that he almost didn't notice the car slowing down beside him. His heart leapt into his throat as the window rolled down. "Excuse me, miss?" a male voice called out. Wesley turned, trying to keep his face calm and composed. "Yes?" The man in the car smiled apologetically. "I'm terribly sorry to bother you, but I seem to be a bit lost. Could you point me in the direction of Main Street?" For a moment, Wesley was too stunned to speak. The man hadn't recognized him. He truly believed he was talking to a woman. Clearing his throat and pitching his voice slightly higher, Wesley replied, "Of course. You'll want to take the next left, then go straight for about 3 blocks. You can't miss it." The man's face lit up with relief. "Thank you so much. You're a lifesaver." As the car pulled away, Wesley felt a rush of adrenaline course through him. He'd done it. He'd successfully interacted with a stranger while dressed as a woman, and not only had he not been discovered, but he'd actually been helpful. The rest of the walk home passed in a blur of excitement and self-discovery. Wesley found himself noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. The way the fabric of his skirt swished against his legs, the click of his heels on the pavement, the subtle sway of his hips as he walked. As he rounded the corner onto his street, Wesley felt a pang of disappointment. The adventure was coming to an end. But mixed with that disappointment was a newfound confidence and a burning curiosity to explore this side of himself further. He approached his front door, fishing in his purse for the keys. Just as he was about to unlock it, the door swung open, revealing Caroline with a wide grin on her face and a glass of wine in each hand. "Welcome home, darling," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Did you enjoy your walk?" Wesley stepped inside, kicking off his heels with a sigh of relief. "You," he said, pointing an accusing finger at his wife, "are in so much trouble." Caroline laughed, handing him a glass of wine. "Oh, come on, admit it. You had fun." Wesley took a long sip of wine, savoring the cool liquid. As the adrenaline of the evening began to fade, he found himself chuckling. "You know what? I did. I really did." They moved to the living room, Wesley sinking gratefully onto the couch. Caroline curled up next to him, her expression a mix of curiosity and pride. "Tell me everything," she urged, and so Wesley did. He recounted every detail of his journey home, the initial panic, the growing confidence, the encounter with the lost driver. As he spoke, he felt a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the wine. "I never expected to feel so free," he admitted. "It was like I was a different person. No one knew who I was, what I did for a living, what was expected of me. I was just me." Caroline squeezed his hand. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd discover. There's a power in stepping outside of yourself, in challenging the boundaries of who you think you are." Wesley nodded, understanding dawning. "Is that why you left me there? To force me to confront this on my own?" "Partly," Caroline admitted. "But also because I knew you'd never fully embrace the experience if you had me as a safety net. You needed to do this solo to really appreciate it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their wine. Wesley's mind was racing, replaying the events of the evening and imagining future possibilities. "I want to do it again," he said suddenly, surprising even himself with the conviction in his voice. Caroline's face lit up. "Really? You're sure?" Wesley nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Absolutely. But next time, I want to go somewhere more public. A restaurant, maybe, or a bar." "Ooh, ambitious," Caroline teased. "But I love it. We'll start planning tomorrow." As they continued to talk and laugh about the evening's adventure, Wesley felt a sense of excitement building. He'd discovered a new side of himself, one that he was eager to explore further. And with Caroline by his side, supporting and encouraging him, he knew that this was just the beginning of a thrilling journey of self-discovery. Later that night, as Wesley lay in bed, he found himself unable to sleep. His mind kept drifting back to the feeling of the skirt swishing around his legs, the clack of heels on pavement, the rush of successfully passing as a woman in public. He turned to look at Caroline, peacefully asleep beside him. He felt a surge of love and gratitude for her. How many wives would not only accept their husband's desire to cross-dress, but actively encourage and participate in it? Quietly, so as not to wake her, Wesley slipped out of bed and made his way to their walk-in closet. He flicked on the light, his eyes immediately drawn to the section where Caroline's clothes hung. With gentle fingers, he ran his hand along the various fabrics. Silks, cottons, wools. He paused at a flowing summer dress, imagining how it would feel against his skin, how it would move as he walked. His gaze drifted to the shoe rack, where dozens of pairs sat neatly arranged. He remembered the slight discomfort of the heels he'd worn earlier, but also the way they'd made him feel taller, more confident. He made a mental note to practice walking in them more. As he stood there, surrounded by these symbols of femininity, Wesley felt a sense of peace wash over him. This wasn't just about the thrill of deception or the excitement of doing something taboo. It was about expression, about allowing himself to embrace all aspects of his personality. He thought back to his childhood, to the times he'd sneaked into his mother's closet to try on her clothes when no one was home. He'd always felt ashamed afterwards, as if he was doing something wrong. But now, with Caroline's support and his own growing self-acceptance, those feelings of shame were being replaced by curiosity and excitement. Wesley's mind began to race with possibilities. Maybe they could take a weekend trip to a city where no one knew them, allowing him to spend the entire time presenting as a woman. Or perhaps they could host a costume party, giving him the perfect excuse to dress up without raising suspicions among their friends. He chuckled softly to himself, realizing how quickly he'd gone from reluctant participant to eager planner. But that was the beauty of self-discovery, wasn't it? Once you opened yourself up to new experiences, you never knew where they might lead. Carefully, so as not to make noise, Wesley selected a silk nightgown from Caroline's side of the closet. He held it up to himself, enjoying the cool, smooth feel of the fabric against his skin. With a quick glance back at the bedroom to ensure Caroline was still asleep, he slipped the nightgown over his head. It settled around him like a caress, the material flowing over his body in a way his usual pajamas never did. He moved to stand in front of the full-length mirror, taking in his reflection. The nightgown hung differently on his frame than it did on Caroline's, but there was something undeniably alluring about the way it draped over his shoulders and chest. Wesley ran his hands down his sides, smoothing the fabric. He turned slightly, watching how the light played off the silk. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to sleep in this every night, to wake up feeling soft and feminine. A floorboard creaked behind him, and Wesley spun around to see Caroline standing in the doorway, a soft smile on her face. "I wondered where you'd gone," she said, her voice thick with sleep. Wesley felt a moment of panic, caught quite literally with his hand in her closet. But the look on Caroline's face wasn't one of judgment or disappointment. Instead, her eyes were filled with love and understanding. "I'm sorry," Wesley said, gesturing to the nightgown. I wanted to see." Caroline crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, resting her head on his chest. "You don't need to apologize, love. You look beautiful." Wesley felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He hugged Caroline tightly, overwhelmed by her acceptance and support. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For everything, for understanding, for encouraging me. I don't know what I'd do without you." Caroline looked up at him, her eyes shining. "We're in this together, Wesley. Whatever you want to explore, whatever you want to try, I'm here for you. Always." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the soft light of the closet. Wesley felt a sense of peace settle over him, a certainty that no matter where this journey took him, he wouldn't be alone. Finally, Caroline stepped back, giving Wesley an appraising look. "You know," she said with a grin, "that nightgown really does suit you. Maybe we should get you one of your own." Wesley laughed, the last of his nervousness melting away. "Maybe we should. And while we're at it, perhaps a few dresses for daytime wear?" Caroline's eyes lit up. "Oh, absolutely. We'll need to go shopping soon. You can't keep borrowing my clothes forever." As they made their way back to bed, Wesley wearing the nightgown and feeling more comfortable in his own skin than he had in years, he felt a surge of excitement for what the future held. Tomorrow, they would start planning their next adventure. Maybe they'd go shopping for clothes that were truly his, or perhaps they'd start researching makeup techniques. Whatever came next, Wesley knew that with Caroline by his side, he was ready to embrace this new chapter of his life fully. As he drifted off to sleep, the silk of the nightgown cool against his skin, Wesley smiled to himself. Who would have thought that a simple dare, a walk home in women's clothing, could have opened up such a world of possibility? The following morning, Wesley woke to the soft caress of silk against his skin, momentarily disoriented before remembering the events of the previous night. A smile tugged at his lips as he stretched, reveling in the unfamiliar yet delightful sensation of the nightgown. Caroline stirred beside him, her eyes fluttering open. "Good morning, beautiful," she murmured, reaching out to touch the silky fabric draped over his chest. Wesley felt a blush creep up his neck. "Good morning," he replied, his voice still husky with sleep. "I can't believe I actually slept in this." "And how did it feel?" Caroline propped herself up on an elbow, her expression curious and encouraging. Wesley took a moment to consider. "Liberating," he finally said, "like I've been wearing the wrong clothes my entire life." Caroline's face lit up with a mixture of joy and pride. "I'm so glad you're embracing this, love. Now, what do you say we start planning our next adventure over breakfast?" They made their way to the kitchen, Wesley still wearing the nightgown. As Caroline busied herself with the coffee maker, Wesley found himself twirling, enjoying the way the fabric swirled around his legs. "You know," Caroline said, a mischievous glint in her eye, "if you like the feel of that, wait until you try a proper dress." Wesley's heart skipped a beat at the thought. "I'd like that," he admitted. "But where would we even start?" Caroline set 2 steaming mugs of coffee on the table and pulled out her laptop. "Well, first things first, we need to get you properly fitted. No more borrowing my clothes. It's time you had your own." They spent the next hour browsing online stores, Caroline explaining the intricacies of women's sizing and style. Wesley found himself drawn to flowing sundresses and elegant cocktail attire, imagining how they might look on his frame. "We should probably start with something more casual for everyday wear," Caroline suggested gently. "Maybe some skirts and blouses, a few pairs of women's jeans." Wesley nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. "You're right, but how do we do this without raising suspicion? I'm not sure I'm ready for everyone to know yet." Caroline squeezed his hand reassuringly. "We'll take it slow. There's a boutique in the next town over. We could make a day trip of it. They're known for their discretion and have experience with customers like you." The idea of going out in public to shop for women's clothing sent a thrill through Wesley. "Okay," he said, taking a deep breath. "Let's do it." The following weekend found them pulling into the parking lot of a quaint boutique named Velvet Rose. Wesley's palms were sweaty as he exited the car, dressed in his usual masculine attire but with a hint of mascara and clear lip gloss, a small concession to his newfound femininity. A bell chimed softly as they entered the shop. A tall, elegant woman with silver hair approached them, her smile warm and welcoming. "Welcome to Velvet Rose. I'm Margot. How can I assist you today?" Caroline stepped forward, her hand on Wesley's back. "Hello, Margot. We called earlier about a private fitting session for my partner. Understanding dawned in Margot's eyes. Of course. Please follow me to our private salon. They were led to a secluded area at the back of the store, filled with racks of clothing and a large tri-fold mirror. Margot turned to Wesley, her gaze kind and professional. Now then, dear, what sort of look are we going for today? Wesley swallowed hard, finding his voice. I'm new to this. I think we should start with some basics. Skirts, blouses, maybe a dress or two. Margot nodded approvingly. An excellent place to begin. Let's start by taking your measurements, and then we'll bring in some pieces for you to try. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of fabric and color. Wesley tried on more clothes than he had in years, marveling at the variety of styles and textures available in women's fashion. With each outfit, he felt more comfortable, more like himself. Oh, Wesley, Caroline gasped as he emerged from the changing room in a knee-length floral dress. You look absolutely radiant. Wesley turned to the mirror, his breath catching in his throat. The dress hugged his waist before flaring out gently, creating the illusion of curves. The pattern of soft blues and greens brought out the color of his eyes, and for the first time he truly saw himself as beautiful. I'll take it, he said, his voice thick with emotion. By the time they left the boutique, Wesley had a whole new wardrobe, everything from casual day wear to a stunning evening gown. As they loaded the bags into the car, he felt a sense of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. So, Caroline said as they pulled out of the parking lot, where to next? Home to try on your new clothes? Wesley bit his lip, considering. Then, with a surge of courage, he made a decision. Actually, I was thinking maybe we could go for lunch. There's a little cafe I've been wanting to try in the next town over. Caroline's eyes widened in surprise. You mean, dressed as you are now? Wesley nodded, his heart racing. If that's okay, I feel so good right now. I don't want it to end yet. Caroline's face broke into a radiant smile. Of course it's okay. I'm so proud of you, Wesley. They drove to the neighboring town, Wesley's nerves growing with each mile. As they parked outside the cafe, he took a deep breath, smoothing down his new skirt. Ready? Caroline asked, squeezing his hand. Wesley nodded, stepping out of the car. The sun was warm on his face, the breeze gently ruffling his hair. He stood tall, embracing the feeling of being truly himself for the first time in public. They entered the cafe, Wesley bracing himself for stares or whispers. But none came. The hostess greeted them with a smile, leading them to a cozy table by the window. As they perused the menu, Wesley felt a sense of normalcy settle over him. He was just another patron enjoying lunch with his partner. No one was judging him or even looking twice. This is amazing, he whispered to Caroline over his menu. I feel so free. Caroline reached across the table to take his hand. You are free, love. Free to be exactly who you are. They enjoyed a leisurely lunch, chatting and laughing like any other couple. Wesley found himself relaxing more with each passing moment, his earlier nerves all but forgotten. As they were finishing their dessert, a young woman approached their table. Wesley tensed, preparing himself for a confrontation. Instead, the woman smiled warmly. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just had to tell you. I love your dress. The color is gorgeous on you. Wesley felt a blush creep up his cheeks. Thank you, he managed, his voice slightly higher than usual. That's very kind of you to say. As the woman walked away, Wesley turned to Caroline, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Did that really just happen? Caroline nodded, her own eyes misty. It did, because you're beautiful, Wesley, inside and out. They left the cafe hand in hand, Wesley walking with a newfound confidence. As they drove home, he found himself already planning their next outing. You know, he said thoughtfully, I think I'm ready to try that bar you mentioned. Maybe next weekend? Caroline grinned, squeezing his hand. Absolutely, we'll make a night of it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.